Social media has been exploding recently after a clip from Maeve Hallagan debating an LGBTQ plus topic at the Cambridge University emerged. There were some other people that spoke. We're going to take a look at that as well. But this one gets very interesting and hits hard. Let's take a look.
Don't tell me to be kind if being kind involves lying to and medicalizing kids, betraying lesbian and gay people, rolling back women's hard-fought-for rights, and hurling threat at those who object. Again, hatred, you talk about it. Try being a woman who knows what one of those are. I'll tell you about hatred.
But Maeve was actually towards the end of the debate. There were a few speakers before, and I think it's worth taking a look at a couple of them. A few of them said what adds up to not very much, to be honest. But there were a couple that made a few pertinent points, and I think it's important to take a look at the context so that we can fully appreciate Maeve's knockout blows. The first person is a person called Buck Angel. This person refers to themselves as a transsexual. And these are the bravest, in my opinion, because he is advocating against the very recent and modern militaristic LGBTQ plus type activism, and is arguing that it's actually doing the cause an injustice. These are the types of people that the activists go after.
I have been an activist in the LGBT community for 40 plus years. I am 63 years old. It makes me emotional today even to think about it, 34 years later. Today, I see rights that I never thought I would see. I see rights to live with the opposite sex, with the same sex, I'm sorry. I see rights that are important in same-sex attraction. That's why those words matter to me and to many people in the LGBT community today. That's why...
Interesting that he stopped short of the T there, the LGBT community. That's important because to be a member of the LGBT community, especially the L's and the G's, the L's and the G's are same-sex attracted. So sex as an immutable characteristic has to mean something. People that are attracted to the same sex are attracted to the same biological immutable sex, not the performative gender that a person ascribes to. This is an important distinction. This is an important distinction in the debate. And I commend Buck Angel for making it.
Sex matters. That's why understanding what sex is and understanding what biology is. But today I see many people say things like, biology is a social construct. You can change your sex. You are assigned female at birth. These things are not only transphobic, they are also homophobic. And I have seen so much change in the LGBTQ plus MIPZ community, it is embarrassing. It is wrong. And it has taken away so much of what we fought for. Because now people don't take us seriously anymore. They don't like trans people. They don't like to see somebody like me turn myself into a man. They feel deceived. They feel angry, rightfully so. We have doctors in our community who prescribe things like puberty blockers to young children with no backing. We have many studies that show this does not work. A child cannot change their sex.
Nope.
If an adult cannot change their sex, a child cannot change their sex. If
You're
a
brave,
child
Buck.
doesn't know what toy they want to play with today or tomorrow, how can they change their sex? Why would you put a child on irreversible hormones, puberty
They are
blockers,
irreversible.
same-sex hormones, without the understanding of the long-term effects that will do to a child?
By the way, if you haven't already, read Trans by Helen Joyce. This is where I learned, in basic terms, why puberty blockers aren't reversible. When a person goes through puberty, in order for them to go through the necessary steps to be able to reproduce, to have children, the primary process of puberty has to occur naturally for that individual to produce either sperm or eggs. The secondary puberty activities which is if you're a man, a hair on your face, hair on your chest. If you're a woman, the growth of breasts, etc. These are the things that the cross-sex hormones will stimulate. But if the human body has not engaged the primary puberty activities naturally, it never will. So when these puberty blockers pause puberty, this is why they are indirectly sterilizing children. This is what we're doing to children. Well, actually, in the UK, we've done quite well here, and we're doing as much as we can to outlaw it. But that's only been for the last 5 minutes. Up until it was either 2024 or 2025. I think it was actually I think it was last year. I think it was 2025. It's very recent that we've stopped prescribing them, and I think there are loopholes that people can exploit to give these drugs to children. There is no way a child can make a decision that is going to result in them not being able to have children of their own later on in life. And any adult that believes we should be doing that to children is despicable. And we know who you are as well. We've all jumped on bandwagons. I have myself. I was a fully paid up member of the Labour Party for 7 years. I voted Remain. You might say, what's this got to do with the trans debate? Well, what it's got to do with it is these are all things that one must subscribe to be on the left, to have all the right and correct opinions. So maybe you've been swept up by the ideology and you've subscribed to it. But once you become aware of the insidiousness of this movement when it comes to children, especially, and when it comes to men crossing sex-divided boundaries and entering female-only sports, once you become aware of these facts, if you're aware of it and you continue to subscribe to it, you are the evil. This doesn't mean that we don't have the capacity to have respect for people that would like to present themselves as a different gender. I have a lot of respect for Buck. For me, this is the definition of courage, of bravery. Just don't medicalize kids. Don't cross sex-divided boundaries. Don't compete in women's sports. And keep the ideology away from kids.
I tell you right now, I know what long-term effects of testosterone can do to a female body. How do I know that? It happened to me. Does the transgender community care? No, they do not. I am considered an elder in this community, yet I am looked down upon. I am ridiculed, called names, even called transphobic, because I do not believe in the way this community is headed. The LGB part of the community is about sexuality. The TQIAMWST is about something else. It's about choices of identity, which are fine. It's about choices of living a life different than everybody else, which is fine. But it does not represent a community that once thrived helping each other. We helped each other get these. The way I got here was because of gay men, not because of the trans community, not because of gay women. Gay men helped me find this space. Today, the transgender community does not acknowledge the work I have done in order to be in places like this and talk about the reason I'm alive at 63 years old. But the one thing I want to say to you all here today is facts and reality matter. They matter for everybody, not just LGBTQIA community. And when a community starts to fracture because they don't agree on things, that means the community is no longer a community. It is at war with itself. It is at war with the elders of the community. It is at war with doctors and psychiatrists and institutions that have now monetized what I have done. How they've monetized it? Point of information. They've monetized it through medical access to puberty blockers, to lies that puberty blockers without any type of mental health care are the way to go. We have something called detransitioners. Do you know what a detransitioner is? A detransitioner is somebody who was told they were transgender, took medical testosterone, puberty blockers, top surgery, bottom surgery, and decided that they made a mistake. I stand here today to tell you, transsexual people exist, transgender people exist, the LGBTQIA community should be separated. There are two different factions now that need two different ways of being. And until we all understand that, and more dialogue gets opened, and people who are not in the community are able to have that dialogue, we are not allowed to have dialogue with other people because you get shut down and called transphobic, homophobic, bigot, Nazi, bootlicker, right wing. Should I go on?
This next speaker, he doesn't really say very much. He speaks largely in platitudes, and he only really touches on the gay issue, which, to my mind, is largely solved. Does anybody care about anybody being gay anymore? Really? I mean, really? Does anybody care? It's just, in my mind, it's, and society has moved on. This is a non-issue. However, there is a person in the audience that makes a contribution that is well worth taking note of.
And I think what's changed is it's not been about universalism, it's been about differences. And I think this kind of change is not clearer anywhere more than the progress flag. I think the progress flag is a pretty insidious attack job on what was a beautiful, beautiful rainbow flag. The rainbow flag is the perfect metaphor for universalism, about what makes us the same as everyone else. The progress flag.
Yeah, what the fuck even is the progress flag? If we take a look at them side by side, does anybody have the slightest clue what this even means?
Not about connecting people, but about dividing people up and caring about identity for the sake of identity. And I think this is where LGBT activism has gone wrong. This project is not about solidarity anymore. It's about what makes you different.
And then it's time for the truly indoctrinated. This guy looks like Angry Kid that's been on the old Manjaro.
I want to talk about some people who transgender people have to face. And one example, and I want you, when I go through these examples, to really think, are these people making criticisms, rational criticisms in response to activism? Or is there something far deeper and darker that they're drawing on and that they're going through and being powered by? For example, I want to talk about Graham Linehan. Now, he's already called me a twerp, as Franny has alluded to. So, this is already, if you're watching Graham, hello. But he's somebody who's gone from making Father Ted films to sort of potentially rather sad career on social media. But here are the kind of things that Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, who posed smiling next to him, thinks is fine and is rational debate in response to the overreach of trans activists. He suggested, in response to somebody who annoyed him, make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls. Respectful, great debate there.
Now, I'd like to introduce you to something called comedy. You may not be familiar with it. You certainly aren't funny yourself. Now, it's also worth noting as well that tweet that Graham Linehan tweeted, British armed police were there ready to arrest him for that tweet. So let's tell the whole story, shall we, Angry Kid? Graham Linehan posted what is clearly a joke, and, I mean, it still tickles me now, to be honest. And the British establishment responds by sending armed police to arrest him. Disproportionate reaction, much? Angry Kid? Just before the main event, forgive me, somebody from the audience makes a contribution, and it's a very valid one. So we're gonna.
Serena from Newnham. I would like to take Yusuf's point a bit further and argue in favor of abstention from this motion, because I believe the construct of the LGBTQ plus community is incoherent. This is a community that does not and actively opposes the rights of lesbians to this day. And I want to just list a few examples from the past few years that illustrate this point, that the L in the LGBTQ plus is really never part of the LGBTQ plus. In Australia, for years now, lesbians have not been able to legally gather in lesbian-only events. They have been required to include men who identify as lesbians in those events, thus making these events hostile to many women and making them no longer lesbian events. Lesbian dating apps are full of men. I'm telling you, these apps are terrible, and you cannot filter. If you try to filter, you will be banned. Cotton ceiling rhetoric in the past decade and a half, this notion that it is sort of somehow the final frontier for trans-identified men who call themselves lesbians to sleep with real lesbians. This is some kind of civil rights struggle to have sexual access to women who are not interested in them. The Michigan Women's Music Festival was canceled about a decade ago. This is a primarily lesbian organized and lesbian attended event. Two prominent organizers of this event, a lesbian couple, were murdered by a trans-identified man who was upset about the fact that he was not allowed to attend the festival. His name is Dana Rivers. He's in a women's prison in California. And just to demonstrate the fact that lesbians do oppose this, we are vastly overrepresented amongst the women who are also vastly overrepresented in the struggle to preserve women's rights, because we are not only lesbians, we are women too. Women such as Julie Bindel, Magdalene Burns, Joanna Cherry, Lizzie Pitt, Kate Barker, Jamie Reed, and two of the co-founders of the Cambridge University Society of Women, Thea and myself, all lesbians. I'm still going. There are currently no lesbian bars in London that are only lesbians. They all accept men. It is almost impossible to organize lesbian events without them being picketed, protested by the LGBTQ+. This is clearly a community that is opposed to lesbian rights. And I think it's really important that we recognize that this is not a coherent category, and we should abstain from the motion because it is nonsensical.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Come on, folks. Come on. The biological male identifies as a female. That person isn't a lesbian. Do these lesbians not have the right to request that the women they sleep with don't have penises? Is that really too far out of a request for these lesbian women that are interested in biological women? That they might just request, sorry to be a pain, hope I'm not causing too much hassle, but do you mind if I don't go for the women with penises? Okay, now on to the main event. Maeve. This woman's going to be a superstar.
In Russian literature, she is a founding president of the Cambridge University Society of Women and a commentator on issues of women's rights, freedom of speech, and youth extremism. Maeve, you have the ears of the House.
And thank you very much for having me to speak. You may have spoken here many, many times. This will be my first and my last. I'm only at this university for a year, and just to introduce myself again, I'm the founding president of the Cambridge University Society of Women. That's a big part of how I decided to spend my time here. So, thank you very much for the previous speeches. I'd like to open by saying that somewhere along the way, recently, the movement that fought for gay liberation decided that gay people were the problem. Now, I'm not here to tell you that the original struggle for gay and lesbian rights was misguided. It wasn't. I'm not here to tell you that progress hasn't been made. Happily, it absolutely has. I am here to tell you, though, that the activist movement that was built to protect gay and lesbian people has, in significant and measurable ways, and as my friend and co-founder just elucidated, it has abandoned gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. And those paying the highest price for that abandonment are increasingly also children. After founding the society, I've been shouted at in the street, dubbed a fascist, spat at, insulted for how I look, contacted online with rape and death threats. You talk about hatred, I can tell you all about it. A woman trying to assert her sex-based rights and those of her peers gets abused for doing so. This is one of the many horrifically logical impacts, conclusions of modern LGBTQ+ activism, a movement that has lost its way at best. Here's something that shouldn't be controversial. The Equality Act says that sexual orientation means attraction to the same sex, the opposite sex, or both. The UK Supreme Court ruled last April that sex means biological sex. That's the law. It also happens to be the science. As my fellow speaker said earlier, same-sex attraction is about the reality that our bodies come in two types, whether you like it or not. Male and female, and modern LGBTQ+ activism has spent the better part of a decade now, let's be honest, trying to erase that fact, because if sex is real and is immutable, a whole lot of what they've been doing falls apart. Inconvenient, isn't it? I'm going to make some progress first, thank you. The focus and the funding within LGBTQ+ organisations has been shifting rapidly and with very little democratic mandate from the communities they claim to represent. This shift is often away from gay and lesbian concerns and towards this nebulous TQ+. The whole point of having LGB lobby groups is to address the fact that gay people have specific needs or issues that are sometimes different from those of wider society. When you move the focus, you ignore those issues. As you mentioned rightly earlier, there are over 60 countries, most in the global south, where homosexuality is still illegal. The parochial LGBTQ lobby here cares much more about pronouns and adding 57 letters to an acronym we're all already stumbling over when they're... I'm not making an assertion about everybody. I'm saying that this is what's happening more generally. If you let me finish, please.
No intervention without the speaker accepting.
Pipe down, angry kid.
To what you said earlier, Franny, it is hyper-introspective. It is frustrating. There are bigger, real issues. Even organising generally is being attacked, what you'd think would be quite a neutral thing to do. The registered charity, the LGB Alliance, was founded by 2 lesbian women, both long-time left-wing activists in this country. This is a group whose stated aim is advocacy for same-sex attracted people. And a murky coalition of LGBTQ+ organisations took them to court simply for doing so. Their position, LGBT people organising on the basis of sex, is transphobic. The movement eats itself. And that case failed, but the fact it was brought tells you everything. Gay and lesbian people across the world have drawn the obvious conclusion. The LGB Alliance in the UK, equivalent groups across Europe, South America, Australia and beyond. When a community starts building these get-outs, ask what they're escaping from. And what have the institutions been doing while their supposed beneficiaries were forming so many breakaway groups in protest? Let us take Stonewall, as mentioned earlier. It was set up to advocate for LGBs. It added the T in 2015. And since then, it has done almost nothing but make outrageous demands based on its trans agenda.
Highly significant point there. They added the T. Stonewall added the T in 2015. 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Not a long time. It's not a long time. Why is that significant? That's significant because anybody who is peddling this ideology now has to accept that they are peddling completely novel ideology. There have been examples in history of people that have undergone an attempt at sex changes in one way or another. Again, read Trans by Helen Joyce, and she gives a fairly decent picture of the history of it. But prior to 2015, I mean, I'm 36, I'm born in 1990. If you're my age and you're just a regular person and you've stumbled upon this video or my content, think back to when you were in school. Now, think about the kids that you went to school with that you thought, yeah, they're probably going to be gay when they're older. Or maybe when you were in primary school, it was already obvious and they were already out. None of you went to school with people that you thought, maybe they'll be trans. Yeah, maybe they're going to be trans when they're old. This isn't biological. Like, being gay is just, it's something that you're born with. It's immutable. You can't change it. The trans thing is fine for adults. I've already laid out the rules. But for kids? We're going to medicalize kids because of some letter that was added to the LGB in 2015. Now all of a sudden we're medicalizing kids.
It has literally run workshops for lesbians to unlearn their objection to male genitalia. In activist spaces, as she said, this is called breaking through the cotton ceiling, by analogy, just to make clear, with the glass ceiling, something to be smashed through. The organisation that marched for gay liberation is now running seminars on overcoming lesbians' resistance to men. I'll let you decide what word you want to use for that. I'll ask you directly, does progressive come to mind? Over 80% of males, by the way, let's be clear, over 80% of males who identify as transgender lesbians retain their male anatomy. The majority are, by any prior definition, heterosexual men. And the movement that was supposed to protect lesbians is instead providing ideological cover for them to be coerced. When you ask how modern activism fails its community, you could start right there. And let's briefly talk about children. The CAST review was published in 2024. It's the first authoritative, independent review of paediatric gender medicine ever conducted in the world, and it's accepted as such by every medical organisation in this country. Its findings were depressingly and entirely predictable if you've been paying attention. The Gender Identity Development Service, or GIDS, at the Tavistock, which for years was the flagship institution of gender-affirming care for young people in the UK, it's been closed down. It was closed because it was found to be harming children, not metaphorically, physically, psychologically, and irreversibly. Between 60 and 80% of the young people referred to GIDS were same-sex attracted. 60 to 80%. A cohort of children who, in an earlier era, before this modern activism, would very likely have grown up to be gay or lesbian, but they were instead placed on a medical pathway involving puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and in some cases, surgeries. This was because they didn't necessarily conform to archaic, empty, sex-based stereotypes, like how they dressed or wore their hair, toys they played with, friends they made. And clinicians who raised concerns, by the way, who tried to do their jobs, they were marginalised. Whistleblowers reported a culture in which questioning a child's self-identified gender was treated as a safeguarding failure rather than as a safeguarding duty. They had a very, very dark joke that one of the whistleblowers reported. At the rate referrals are going, there will be no gay people left. And that's not some kind of conspiracy theory. This is testimony from clinicians working inside the institution that was then closed down. I know it's inconvenient for you to hear. And if you still doubt what I'm saying, Google Kira Bell and read her story and the stories of many detransitioners like her, and then insult them by pretending that the regret rate is low.
No back and forth without the speaker accepting.
Before the availability and normalisation of puberty blockers, by the way, the vast majority of kids, in every single study, no matter how large or small, showed this, the vast majority of kids with gender dysphoria grew out of it well before adulthood. And what was the ideological infrastructure sustaining all this? Well, Stonewall crops up again, and its school guidance was enforcing this idea: trans women are women, trans men are men, presenting it to children as established fact, lying to them, compelling them to repeat it, or face accusations of transphobic bullying. The Education Act 1996 explicitly prohibits political indoctrination of children in schools. Stonewall's guidance on any honest reading crosses that line. And school libraries, materials recommended by these same organisations sitting on shelves in British schools right now, instructing children how to use adult hookup applications, how to bind their breasts without telling their parents, how to source and self-administer cross-sex hormones in secret without medical supervision alone. Children's education becomes a delivery mechanism for guidance on making irreversible changes to their bodies behind closed doors, away from the adults who love them. And don't you dare object. When parents raise safeguarding objections, they're routinely characterised by activist organisations as homophobes or transphobes, and it's a remarkable manoeuvre, maybe even wily. Make the protection of children synonymous with bigotry and watch very reasonable people go quiet. In Canada, therapists are already legally prohibited from questioning a child's gender self-ID. They may only affirm. We heard this week that the UK may follow. Think about what that means. Just for a sec, a clinician who pauses, who asks whether a child might simply be gay or might simply need time, is now being framed as a conversion therapist. The child's perceived transness trumps medical judgment and parental consent. It trumps the child's own safety. And who profits from all of this? Well, there's an entire industry here of NGOs and charities that are making money on HR advice and EDI, and also the people who prescribe. One person who profits is in this room, Helen Weberly. She has a private medical practice that's no longer registered in this country, but moved first to Spain and then to Singapore. Gender GP, as it's called, has been named in several court cases for providing substandard and inappropriate care. In my opinion, that makes her a completely untrustworthy source on this topic, yes.
I've worked with Helen Weberly on a personal level as well, and what I will say, that woman is nothing but who is overcharging a lot of trans people in this country for trans healthcare. I will say this with categorically, please let me to get to the point. I will say this as a whole. As a trans person who sat here, she is the reason why this motion is in play, because activism has failed us.
Thanks.
If the speaker shut down the point of information, back to the speaker.
Look, I'll finish.
For context, he's somebody that has dealt with Helen Weberly, who is the devil incarnate. She, by the way, if it turns out that the Christian faith is completely 100% true, and Jesus is one day to walk among us again, he'll point to Helen Weberly and say, she's the devil. This person that just spoke then was essentially calling her a grifter. There are going to be lots of children that grow up. Children don't stay children forever. They grow into adults. And then children, when they become adults, ask questions of the adults that were around when they were children. And they're going to realise that there was this woman called Helen Weberly that ran this gender practice. And because of her, I'll never know what it's like to have a baby. Because of her, I was just a gay boy or a lesbian girl. And now I've had parts of my body removed, or I've taken this medication and I can't have children. And now, because of all these hormones I've been taking, I've developed bone diseases, and for the rest of my life, my health is going to be impacted because of this doctor.
What happens to gay and lesbian people when the word sex stops meaning anything? What happens to children who may then grow up to be same-sex attracted? They're being failed by the people who claim to protect them. I want to say something to the many of you who I expect will probably disagree with me. I don't think that you're bad people. Of course I don't. I think you've been sold a story, a comfortable lie, in which being progressive means never questioning the dominant institutional line, and it's a line in which compassion is equated with compliance. But real compassion asks hard questions. Real advocacy protects the people it claims to represent, even when that's inconvenient. Real activism doesn't silence lesbians, medicalize children, or tell a little boy who plays with dolls that actually he's a girl. There's no serious activism happening in these institutions, as I've unpacked. There's ideological enforcement, language policing, nasty online abuse, regressive demands dressed up as virtue, and there are children very likely to grow up same-sex attracted, questioning vulnerable children who are paying the price for our collective reluctance to say so. It's not bigotry to notice, I don't care what you say to me. It's not cruelty to object to it. It's not backwards to ask who exactly modern LGBTQ plus activism is for. Be brave. Let yourself question the narrative that you're being fed. Don't tell me to be kind if being kind involves lying to and medicalizing kids, betraying lesbian and gay people, rolling back women's hard-fought-for rights, and hurling threat at those who object. Again, hatred, you talk about it. Try being a woman who knows what one of those are. I'll tell you about hatred. Subscribe to this kindness and I'll tell the truth instead. I speak in favour of this motion. Be brave and support it as well. Thank you.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal. And by the way, to anybody who's watching, if you are somebody that goes along with this because you conflate, like Maeve said there, compassion with compliance, at what point are you going to be brave? At what point are you going to be brave and realise, yeah, okay, yeah, this ideology is not good for children. It's actually, we shouldn't be allowing men into women's spaces. I need to do the right thing and I need to speak up about it when it's inconvenient and uncomfortable to do so. Otherwise, you're just a coward. This is Helen Webley. I'm not gonna play what she has to say. You can go out there and listen to it if you really want to. There is nothing that she says that is worth listening to. She is an awful, awful, awful person, espousing the worst of the worst. And the amount of venom when she talks about women is terrifying. But thanks for sticking around. I appreciate you watching the video. Do us a favour and subscribe if you've made it to this point. Why not watch this video that's on the screen? It's either there or there. I always forget which way around, but I'm going to be pointing at it. One of these two here. Give it a watch. You might like it. Leave a comment. Tell me how horrendous you think I am if you think I'm horrendous. Or if you solidly agree, why not say so? Or if you think I missed something out that I could have said that didn't,